You're all familiar with Bhagavad Gita, no doubt. One of the first books that I read in Krishna consciousness, I was explaining this morning. When I first read it, it changed my life, and it is continuing to change my life. And each time we read Bhagavad Gita, there's always something fresh and new to discover. So I thought I'd read from the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Anyone know what the 9th chapter is called? Most confidential knowledge, yes. So there's, we need knowledge in this world to make our way in this world. I'm sure we need knowledge. We need knowledge how to program a computer. We need to make a way in this world, so we need some knowledge, we need some education, and there's lots of knowledge out there. But really, the type of knowledge described here is the type of knowledge which is going to lift us out of grief and anxiety. No matter how much material knowledge that we may have, or that we learn in school or college, then that's not necessarily going to solve the problems of life. So one of the main problems of life is anxiety. When we stop people on the street, because when we distribute books, we say, "Have you heard of anxiety?" It's a really sarcastic question. Everyone is dealing with anxiety to one form or another. So transcendental knowledge, it aims to give us an understanding of who we actually are beyond this changing temporary body. And that's mentioned in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, how there's a difference between the soul and the body. So we need knowledge about that soul. And that's described throughout the whole Bhagavad Gita, and specifically here, the most confidential knowledge, here in chapter 9. Now, it's also called the most confidential knowledge because in this chapter, Krishna is specifically going to describing what actually pleases Krishna. That actual service which pleases the Lord or pleases Krishna. And that's the service which is done out of priti, which is done out of love and affection. I'm sure we even have that experience on the material platform. It's when someone's doing something for us and they're not expecting anything in return. Especially you can see this in the relationship between parents and the children. The parents are quite selfless in the service that they do for their children. They're not exactly expecting something in return. Of course, some respect should be there from the children. They get the idea? Generally, in this world, people are very materially motivated. Even we say it's good people go to church, they go to the synagogue, and they go to the mosque, they go to the temple. It's good. But generally they're having some motive, something they actually want, which is good. It means they're pious, they come. But Bhagavad Gita and Krishna's teachings takes us a little bit above just that kind of ritualistic attendance or that ritualistic reason for doing duties. Higher and above that is to do it out of love. And that's why this chapter is called the most confidential knowledge, because Krishna is giving insight into what that actually is. And there's 3 specific verses in the 9th chapter where Krishna speaks about this. So one is 9.14. So I'll read through Srila Prabhupada's translation and the purple, and we'll read through it and have some discussion. Then the next one is 9.22. Anyone know that 9.22? How does it begin again? And 9.26. So let's begin with this one. But before we begin, please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hang on, going on outside. Okay, so Krishna speaking. Satata keta yantamam vitantas cha tudavrudaha vimasyam chas chamam bhakta nichayutta upasate. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, Krishna is speaking about someone who is devoted to him 100%, someone who is devoted to Krishna. So describes what are the symptoms of that. So he says, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, just like when we come into this room, we will bow down because Gaudita is here. These great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So you can repeat after me, repeat together. Always chanting my glories.
Always chanting my glories.
Endeavoring with great determination.
Endeavoring with great determination.
Chitta vrata. Yeah. Bowing down before me.
Bowing down before me.
These great souls.
These great souls.
Perpetually worship me with devotion.
Perpetually worship me with devotion.
Yeah. So we worship Krishna every Sunday. No, we worship Krishna every day. I mean, those who just been coming, but we chant Krishna's holy name. You see, we have japa beats, and we do it as a meditation every day. Some devotees chant. It takes 2 hours. Some may chant for a few minutes. Some we do every day. No matter what comes at us, no matter what the material world throws at us, we're always chanting Krishna's name. So sometimes it takes determination, because there can be many distractions. Does anyone get distracted? Every day. Life is a distraction from, you could say life is a distraction from our essential purpose. So what as devotees of Krishna is what we do, everyone here, your devotees, is we have specific practices that we do every day, regardless of the weather, yeah? Regardless of the situations that we are in. We have some worship that we do in the morning, and we do some meditation. Yeah? Sometimes it's a bit of a test, especially mother, you're very busy. Yeah? But we take sometimes it's called we create some sacred space. Like this is a sacred space. Yeah? So we create it at home. But always chanting my glories and endeavoring with great determination. Bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. Yeah? That's the important ingredient. With devotion. So let's read Srila Prabhupada's purport. The Mahatma cannot be manufactured by rubber stamping an ordinary man. The symptoms are described here. A Mahatma is always engaged in chanting the glories of Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. He has no other business. He is always engaged in the glorification of the Lord. In other words, he is not an impersonalist. When a question of glorification is there, one has to glorify the Supreme Lord, praising his holy name, his eternal form, his transcendental qualities, and his uncommon pastimes. One has to glorify all these things. Therefore, a Mahatma is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why I explain that a little bit, that paragraph. Oh, you have it there. Okay. Right. So the Mahatma is not manufactured by rubber stamping and ordinary man. So Prabhupada is speaking about a specific time in India when it was Gandhi's movement, or that everyone should be considered to be Narayan. The Ridra Narayan. You heard that term? The Ridra means poor. So there was a social movement in India because in India there's a bit of, sometimes can be quite a political discussion about the caste system. So there's those who do the cleaning, etc. They may be called untouchables. You heard of that? Untouchables. So even now there's a lot of discussion, politics on that. So they were termed to be Narayan. In one sense it's good because it's invoking some type of respect. So like we should respect everyone. But they was given the term that they are just given the title, you are Narayan. So it was a political movement. So Prabhupada's speaking about that here. So it takes more than just getting a label. To actually be, well, you can't, for one sense, Narayan is never poor. Narayan is a name for the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Yeah. So Prabhupada's commenting on that here. And it says, so a Mahatma is engaged in glorifying Krishna. So it continues, next paragraph. One who is attached to the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmajyoti, is not described as Mahatma in the Bhagavad Gita. He is described in a different way. In the next verse, he's described in a different way in the next verse. The Mahatma is always, let me read that again. He's described in a different way in the next verse. The Mahatma is always engaged in different activities of devotional service, as described in Srimad Bhagavatam. Hearing and chanting about Vishnu, not a demigod or human being. That is devotion. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. Remembering him. Such a Mahatma has firm determination to achieve at the ultimate end the association of the Supreme Lord in any of the 5 transcendental rasas. To achieve that success, he engages all activities, mental, bodily and vocal, everything in the service of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. That is called full Krishna consciousness. I'll just read through the whole purport that we discussed. In devotional service, there are certain activities which are called determined, such as fasting on certain days, like the 11th day of the moon, the Ekadashi, and on the appearance day of the Lord. All these rules and regulations are offered by the great acharyas for those who are actually interested in getting admission into the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the transcendental world. The Mahatmas, great souls, strictly observe all these rules and regulations, and therefore they are sure to achieve the desired result. As described in the 2nd verse of this chapter, not only is this devotional service easy, but it can be performed in a happy mood. One does not need to undergo any severe penance and austerity. He can live this life in devotional service, guided by an expert spiritual master, and in any position, either as a householder or a sannyasi or a brahmachari. In any condition and anywhere in the world, he can perform this devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus become actually Mahatma, a great soul. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vasudaya Gopaleshmiti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachalini Devasesha Sunavadi Pashtatari Satalini Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. So Prabhupada is describing here in this purport some of the practices of Krishna consciousness. So we have Shravanam, Kirtanam, hearing and chanting about Krishna, Smaranam, and remembering Krishna, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Archanam, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pavanam, Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma, Nivedanam. So these are particular activities. They're called, in practice, it's called Vaidhi Bhakti, where we may not be overwhelmed with devotion. Sometimes we're struggling to find devotion. We may not be overwhelmed with devotional sentiments or pure devotion, but there's a certain lifestyle, there's certain activities that we can do. One of them we mentioned was chanting Krishna's holy name. Yeah? But we do that as a meditation. Generally devotees do it in the morning, but any time. And by engaging in these activities, then what happens is one's cleansing. One's cleansing the heart. It's called Jetu Dharpana. And hopefully, does anyone like to be in clean places?
Yes.
It's nice, isn't it? It's not very nice to be in an unclean place. Of course, it depends what mode of nature you are in. That's also described in Bhagavad Gita. But someone who have these three modes of nature, you've heard of three modes of nature? Yes. We have goodness, passion, ignorance. So someone is in a lower mode, then they won't notice they're living in a very kind of not such a good situation. And sometimes on Oxford Street, we see there's a few homeless people in London. I guess you've got some homeless people here. But they're laying down on the street, and they haven't, it's like Oxford Street's very busy. There's thousands of people, and cars and fire engines going past, but they're in a doorway, and it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're fast asleep. That means they're under a particular mode of nature, yeah, lower modes of nature, yeah. But the point we're making is that we do cleaning externally, but also we need to do cleaning internally, yeah, because our consciousness, which is very subtle, it can easily become materially tinged. Yeah? As soon as we meditate upon material things or material objects, then it affects the consciousness. Yeah? Even if we hear a certain type of music, subtly it does affect the consciousness. Like we was just doing Harinam just now, and we went past a rock band. It's interesting, there was no one watching that rock band. No one was watching, playing away. But it wasn't a very popular band, you know. But it does affect the consciousness. Yeah. So that's why, as much as we can, as devotees of Krishna, we try to do those things, we try to hear those things, we try to eat those things, we try to go to those places where it's good for our consciousness, yeah? Where our consciousness can be elevated. Yeah? And sometimes we notice that we're in we can be in a specific bad mood. You've not been in a bad mood before, you're not feeling very positive about anything. And the next day, the same place, we can be in a different mood. Yeah? Our mood can change a lot. Yeah? And it changes a lot because we're very much materially affected by this material atmosphere. But these practices which Prabhupada's saying here, this simple thing, this always chanting his glories, and he mentioned some practices here. He says, yes, in devotional service there are certain activities which are called determined, such as fasting on certain days. Anyone like fasting? Sometimes. Yeah. So we fast on certain days. We fast on, which days do we fast? On Janmashtami, Gaurapanini, Krishna Chaturdashi, yeah. Ekadashi. Sometimes some devotees fast, some devotees just avoid grains, you know. So Prabhupada says here, in devotional service there are certain kinds of activities which are called determined, such as fasting on certain days, like the 11th day of the moon, that's Ekadashi, and on the appearance day of the Lord. All these rules and regulations, sometimes these words can be frightening, rules and regulations, but they are known as the regulative principles of freedom. Yeah. So there's certain activities which we do in Krishna consciousness, which may be a bit of a surrender. Like one of them is to fast, yeah, like fasting Janmashtami, yeah. But by doing these activities, we take on a little bit of austerity, then we can discover our internal, original, joyful nature. Yeah? And that's why Prabhupada was saying at the end here as well. He was quoting the second verse of this chapter. Actually, Krishna consciousness, it's very joyfully performed. Because we're speaking about rules and regulations, so it may sound quite austere, but actually the process itself is a very joyful. And if we go to the second verse, Raja Vijay Rajaguyam Pavitam Idam Uttamam Patyachavagamam Damyam Susupukatam Avayam. So the verse is here. This knowledge is the king of education and the most secret of all secrets. So it's the king of education. Anyone got educated here? I didn't get much educated. I got some education. Yeah. But the supreme education that we can get is knowledge about Krishna. Yeah? So this knowledge is the king of education. And also it's described as the most secret of all secrets. Rajaguyam. It is the purest knowledge. And because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion, but it is everlasting and it is joyfully performed. So this is one of the longest purports in the Bhagavad Gita, so we won't read through the whole thing, but we'll pick out a few paragraphs here. Okay. So let's go to the second paragraph. Generally, people are not educated in this confidential knowledge, as I explained in the beginning. They're educated in external knowledge. Yeah, at school I wasn't taught the Bhagavad Gita. I wasn't taught the science of self-realization. No, you wasn't even? No. Certainly not. Yes. As far as ordinary education is concerned, people are involved with many departments: politics, sociology, physics, chemistry, mathematics. You only good at maths? Mathematics? You do mathematics? I was useless at maths in school. You do maths? You're good. I was useless.
Well, you can have maths.
As far as ordinary education is concerned, people involve many departments: politics, sociology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, and astronomy, engineering, etc. There are many departments of knowledge all over the world and many huge universities, but there is unfortunately no university or education institution where the science of the spirit soul is instructed. Yet the soul is the most important part of the body. Without the presence of the soul, the body has no value. Still, people are placing great stress on the body of the necessities of life, not caring for the vital soul. Yeah? Yeah, when I was first hearing from devotees and hearing about reincarnation and hearing about the soul, it was so refreshing, actually. I always doubted the education that I was brought up in. So, in other words, there is no such thing as a soul. As far as the education I got from my parents and the culture and the society I was in. There was no teachings about the eternity of the soul. I remember when I was young, when I first heard, I was very young and I heard that someone had died. I didn't know what death was. First time I heard the word. So I asked my mother what it was all about. And she said, well, it's when everything stops. I said, everything stops. It's when everything is finished. So of course I accepted as the absolute authority. Everything my mother said was the absolute truth. Because I would ask her, what's the sun? What's this? What's that? She would lovingly explain to me. So when I asked about death, what's this death? Someone has died. And she said, oh well, that's when it all finishes. So what do you mean? Well, I finish? We all finish? Like you're going to finish? She said, yes, everything's going to finish. So that was the philosophy which, I just accepted it. And I'd always trying to, then later in life, I would try to prepare myself for that time mentally by imagining that I stop existing. I was doing that. I was trying to imagine I would stop existing, and I couldn't compute. It was almost frightening, and I couldn't. I thought, what's the point of life if everything's going to stop at a certain time? So I had these doubts. I didn't have the Bhagavad Gita and I didn't have the science of self-realization. I remember I was also working. I used to work before I took up Krishna consciousness. I used to work as a carpenter on a building site. We had a job and the house was overlooking a vast graveyard. Must have been 5,000 gravestones in this massive big graveyard, I was looking out the window from where I was working, looking at this graveyard and trying to, what's the point? What's the meaning of it? I was getting a bit philosophical. I used to get philosophical sometimes. What's the point? What's the meaning of it? If this is all we're going to end up, So I had a few questions, and so of course, at work, stop spacing out. I don't use the word spacing out. We use more colourful words than that. Get on with your work, And also at school as well, there was, when I first went to secondary school, there was one boy, there was a bit of a leader. He was the one who was, a bit of, in the sense of, he was quite rebellious, So, look at. And the philosophy which he was telling us all was that you only live once, so just make the most of it. So in other words, just go for it. Just enjoy it. Just go for it. At that point, I became a big headache for all the teachers. Like that, So then I finally, I was mentioning this morning, I finally came in touch with this, the science of self-realization. We're speaking about these principles that were not the soul. And it was so refreshing to hear. It was like, yes, now this actually makes sense. This actually makes good sense. And then I was starting to, then I was, coming to the temple, starting to hear more, starting to understand it more, and started to think about it. And in one sense, we can. And Prabhupada gives a simple example where, a simple example you do at school is you point to your hand, point to your leg, point to your nose, and then you actually point to yourself. And you don't know where to point. Where should I point? So then see, the idea is that the more we understand this principle, even if it's theoretically, then we can, in one sense, because it unties the knot, because otherwise we just identify with the body, completely identify with the body. So then as we're growing old, 20, 30, 40, 50, now I'm getting up to 60, then if we have no understanding about the soul, then we're identifying with that aging body. we're misidentifying ourselves as being this body. You know? So you can so once consciousness gets tired into this, it's going to come to an end. You know? And also we have the subtle body as well. Bhagavad Gita describes we have a gross body, it's a body we can see. We have a body that's made of mind, intelligence, and the false ego. So the more we do spiritual activities that's described here, the more we can be situated in our constitutional position as a soul. So that means we can step back a little bit, even from the grief and anxiety that actually goes on within the subtle body, the mind and the intelligence, etc. You follow? Now we have a journey. I'll explain more. We have a conversation with ourselves. You know, actually we have a conversation with Krishna. It's described in Gita as well that Krishna is our best friend and he's situated within our heart. You know? So we go through life and there's a certain conversation that we don't have even with our best friend or a husband or wife or whatever it may be. There's a certain dialogue that we live with on a daily basis, isn't it? There's a conversation going on constantly, you know. And that conversation is actually with Krishna within the heart. And Krishna within the heart, he's always trying to get us, even someone who's not a devotee, he's trying to convince them to do good things, yeah? To do good actions. But a lot of people, they're so caught up in the passionate, in material life that they don't hear that voice. No, let's go back a bit. So when we're in anxiety, so in other words, we actually we the soul comment on the state of our subtle body, the state of our mind. I'm depressed. You know? That's the soul commenting on the state of our consciousness. It's a bit hard to grasp, but through Krishna consciousness, we can kind of tune into this. So therefore we can be a little bit, we can give us some, we can step back a little bit from all the grief and anxiety that we may face, you know. So it's very yeah. One time I had can I share an outer body experience?
Yes, please.
But it was an outer body experience in my body. I was up late one night in our temple and I was cooking what's known as the Mangalati sweets. So every day in the temple, the first thing the devotee wakes up Krishna in the morning, uses the bell, ding ding ding, wakes him up at 3:45. Then we offer sweets to Krishna. We offer burfi, para, rasgulla, lots of different sweets. It takes 4 hours to make it. 4 hours of stirring milk. It's made of milk. So I was busy throughout the day and there was no one had made these sweets. So that means, okay, I'm doing night shift. Yeah, so at 9 o'clock, and that's when I normally sleep. I was already tired, but that's when I start making the sweets, you know. So I'm stirring at 4 hours. And then I finished about 4, 4:30, something like that. I was tired, so I thought, okay, let me go take rest. So I stay in, we have different, because our temple is very small, so we have ashrams dotted around the temple. So I was going to my ashram, and I have a bike which I go to and from the temple. And I was tired, and I was on my bike, and I was pedaling away on my bike. Then at some point, Krishna gave me the intelligence that my body was exactly the same as the bike. The bike was being moved by me. I was being moved by the material energy. My legs were moving, and I was not moving. Yes? I was not moving. My bike became, because once the bike is made of material elements, so is the body. Yeah, the car is made of material elements, so is the body. It's made, but they're constituted in a different way. So it's exactly the same. And I was moving my bike, but I wasn't moving my bike. It was the material energy was moving the bike. I was just desiring the bike to be moved. And at that point, I thought, wow. And I just kind of let go, and I just sat in my body while my body was taking me back to my ashram. I was just enjoying the ride. It wasn't me that was pedaling. The soul was not pedaling. It's my body that's pedaling the bike. You know? But actually described in Gita that the soul does nothing at all. Yeah? The soul just, we just desire. And then by dint of our karma, then the material energy, then by Krishna's grace, we desire, and then things move. Yeah? But it's not us moving. Yeah? We don't ultimately have control. It's all controlled by Krishna. So that came with, I mean, it didn't last at some point. At that point, I was really in that consciousness. But at least I remember it, and I can reflect on it. You know? Then I reflect on it. So, and what to speak of at the time when we have to leave this body. You know? That's why there's another verse that describes that for devotees, when they reach that time when they have to leave the body, they're very sober. What's that verse? As embodied soul continually passes, you know this verse, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul simply passes into another body of death. The sober person is not moved by such a change. So sober doesn't mean not drunk. In one sense, it means, it means that they know about the science of the soul. So devotees, when they come to that time in life, they know exactly what's going to happen. It's not vague at all. It's not vague. They know exactly what's happening. And so they're preparing for that time. So that's what we're doing in a lifetime of devoting ourselves to Krishna. We are preparing for that inevitable end. Sounds a bit, speaking about death. But actually, if we approach it from the point of view of being a soul, then it's joyful. It's actually joyful. Yeah? Because the understanding is that we are not going to die. The soul is eternal. And I was giving this presentation on reincarnation as well. During the early COVID days, I did an online seminar thing on reincarnation. This was for non-devotees, as such, those who don't understand the principles. There was one video. I mean, I won't go into details. There's plenty out there you can watch of persons who have these past life memories. Normally, children have it, and these past life memories. And some of it can be quite. If you want to give evidence from the material perspective, there is a lot out there. But this point here is that we are preparing for that time. So when the body stops working, the next question is, where do we go? Where are we going to go? And that's spoke in Krishna. That's spoke as well in Bhagavad Gita. As well, it depends on our consciousness at the time of death. So, if someone has been just absorbed in just satisfying their immediate demands of the body, regardless of how it may affect other people, regardless of the consequences, then there's good. Might take birth as an animal in the next life. That's described in the Vedic scriptures as well. That the soul, it can transmigrate in this human form, but also it can go down as well. So we want to go up. That's the idea. So the consciousness at the time of death depends upon the life that we've led up to that point. So that's why we try to engage ourselves as much as possible. There's so many. That's what Prabhupada was saying, what we read earlier. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Parasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atman Vedanam. Yeah? So, any questions at this point or comments? Pick up some more things from here. Yes, please.
Thank you. Referring back to what you were saying about your out of body but in body.
The outer body experience, in the
yes,
body.
in body experience. I experienced something similar to what you described, where I wasn't on a bike when I was a child. But I wanted to know whether that feeling of being the soul or not being material energy, does it sort of feel neutral? Because I seem to feel that it sort of felt neutral and it didn't have a personality.
Say again, that last part?
It didn't have a personality.
Yeah.
It was just like an awareness.
Yeah. Some people have that experience, but that point, you who's acknowledging awareness, that's the soul. You mentioned the word just awareness, yeah? You said?
Yes.
Yeah. That point, that's the soul who is becoming aware. You understand? So that's personality. That's why Prabhupada described the, I didn't focus on it, but described as the concept that perfection means we don't have an identity. You know? Or the goal is to delete the soul. You know, you can delete, just like you delete things on the computer. But you understand the point? It's subtle. That that acknowledgement of that state was the soul. That's you acknowledging awareness. You know? But because you're disembodied at that point, you're not focused on the material body. You're just focused on the consciousness which actually comes from that subtle body. One time when I was doing some research for this on reincarnation and presenting it, and I was watching videos on, these people having the outer body experiences, and they're quite easily available now, and you can see it. And they all speak so much, they all have this realization of, they describe it as when they're out of their body, they feel so free, and have all these different experiences. And then, of course, they're telling their experience because they don't stay out of the body. They come back into the body. And sometimes they describe it as, sometimes it's in an accident, normally. They have this outer body experience and they feel free of all anxiety, they feel free of all bodily pains, and they're looking down, at their body. And then at some point, sometimes they're not quite ready to die yet, So they come back into the body and they feel that they're jolted back in their body, But the language they speak like self-realized souls who know they're not the body. Not fully self-realized, they're different stages of self-realization. But they speak as if being a soul. They speak of their experience about the body, about their body's just a material shell. So that answers your question, yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there certain, what kind of soul do you have to be to come out of your body and then possess another body? I'm just asking about possessions and stuff.
Okay, that's sometimes when someone dies untimely, suicide, something like that, then sometimes they may be around in a subtle body, So these, they don't have much power, they're pretty harmless. But sometimes they may try and embody a body, So I don't want to go into ghost stories now. Going to these type of things, but sometimes they're subtle bodies, and they don't have a gross body, So they're quite tormented because they still have desires, but they can't fulfill them because they don't have a material body to actually experience sensual things and things like that. So sometimes they try and inhabit another gross body, you know. And so I was,
Got even more questions now.
huh?
I've got even more questions now.
More questions? Yeah, go ahead. What can we go first?
I was thinking, like as you're describing about how people who have out of body experiences experience themselves as like feel this freedom
Yeah.
from the restricted body, but on the other hand, it sounds like a ghost has a similar a similar circumstance in that they're outside of a gross body, but they experience the world differently. So I was just wondering what was the difference.
Well, they can't interact. Well, it's the same, it's similar.
Mm.
But normally, those who have out-of-body experiences, the body is in such a traumatic experience that by the grace of Krishna, he takes them out of that, you know, and they're in some animated suspension. But because their karma is not ready to die, then they go back again. So persons who are disembodied due to sinful activities and leading a ghostly existence. There is one scripture that describes all the details of that. It's called the Garuda Purana. And a certain amount of time they have to spend in that situation. And I can't remember the details. You know. But what's a shame is that people have this type of experience and they have some type of, it changes their life to some degree, and they go on some type of spiritual path. But it becomes because they don't have direction, they don't really know how to fully utilize that experience. So they end up being some quasi type of spiritualist and quasi type of philosophies. I'm sure you meet people on the street. I mean, they're into spirituality, but they're not clear of what to do with that realization. They don't conclude, okay, I'm a soul, means I'm not the body. Where does the soul come from? What's the point of life? You know? They don't have enough information to actually put it together and to make use of it. You know? And ultimately, we don't have to have these out-of-body experiences. You know? We can, just by reading Bhagavad Gita, just by practicing Krishna consciousness, you know, we can exist in a state of not being attached to our body. You know, as gross or subtle. You know, like that. You know? Yes.
You mentioned you can go into an animal life or different species of life depending on what you think about the time of day. We have 400,000 species of human life, is that correct?
Yeah,
So, is that a hierarchical thing? So, if you're at the top sort of tier of that human species, are you more pious? Because we find that in Krishna consciousness, in my experience, a lot of people have come from backgrounds where they're doing things they shouldn't be, situated in lower modes and then become very good devotees. So what about those that are in higher levels of human species? Are they more pious? I just wanted to know, is there a sort of hierarchy in that human species?
Well, in one sense they have a material body, so it's considered the most advantageous to have a human body. Because then one can inquire into spiritual values. So, but then there's, according to one's, say on a material platform, say materially, then there's different gradations of material facility that you may get according to your karma. Material facility. So you may be born in an affluent situation, good looks, good ed, and things like that. Or you may be born in a very impoverished situation. That's due to one's karma. But regardless of where you are situated materially, we can be, as you're experiencing, you can take to Krishna consciousness. And sometimes it helps, sometimes it can help by being in a bit of a difficult situation, because you tend to question about life. You know? That's why when you try and persons who are very affluent materially, in illusion, they think everything's okay. And like sometimes try and stop people, and they, no, I'm set, mate. I know, I've got, I'm happy. So that's why motive persons, it can be sometimes, being Krishna favors those who are in a difficult situation. So sometimes it can be easier for a person to take to Krishna consciousness, where other persons who perhaps more materially affluent, they can take to Krishna consciousness, and they do. There's many devotees also who come from all types of situations. Some of them come from quite affluent positions, but whatever position they are in, because we are souls, and we can only find happiness ultimately in connection to the Supreme Soul, there's going to be an existential kind of crisis for everyone who's a soul in a material body. Even if you're materially affluent, there's going to be a stage where you're going to, if you're fortunate, going to question life. What's it all about? I was reading this book by one of our devotees, Jayadev, just last night as well. And he is a devotee, and he had everything. Before he was a devotee, he was a member of a band called the Rubettes. You heard of them, the Rubettes? He was the lead. No, he wasn't the lead singer at the time. He was in the band called the Rubettes, very famous, and he came from like a working class background in the in Essex, Romford, and he was always struggling for money. His family. Then he had everything. He had money, he had fame, he had adoration, thousands of people worshipping him, giving him adoration, and he was traveling, here, there, and everywhere. He had a big house, he had a tennis court, he had a swimming pool, he had everything which he dreamed of having. But in that time he wasn't happy. He concluded, and it caused him to question life. I've got this, I've got that, I've got this situation, I've got this, I've got money, but he said, but this is not it. This is not it. I've got everything I wish I could have, but now, but I'm not satisfied. So in answer to your question, so in any stage of life, whether you're, struggling in life or you're materially affluent, then still the miseries of material existence are going to be there. So one can take to Krishna consciousness, whatever karmic situation you're in. It tends to be a little bit more easier for persons who are questioning life due to, perhaps the anxieties of life. But everyone is going to question their existence. Anything on that, Priyakun?
Sorry, Guru?
Anything on that?
No, because I'm in so crash mode, looking after the kids. Anything else from anybody?
Yes.
I'm trying to, I'll come back and try and form, I know what it is I want to ask.
Well, start, see if it comes out.
We make it to the end of this life. We've tried sincerely as much as we can with devotion, but say there's this tinge of attachment still. It feels like, from what I understand, that this realm, this planet is a good place because of the time span to practice this and get out.
Yes.
If we go up, it's a longer lifespan. It's a longer lifespan and the higher.
If you go up to the heavenly planets?
Yeah,
it's a longer lifespan.
It doesn't sound, I'm sure you would start off there and live a life there not really different, but knowing this is a shorter span of life to practice and hopefully find a chance to leave.
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking is like, what's the guarantee one will know, and as Krishna, it's in Krishna's hands, that we'll come back to this planet and hopefully be in a much more favourable situation to go forward.
Yeah, well, whatever advancement that we make, then we will never ever lose that. It will always be with us. And if we happen to still maintain some attachments subtly, some attachments may still be there. And sometimes it describes that devotees may go to the heavenly planets to exhaust their material attachment for enjoyment. You know? And then after that, they may go back to Godhead. Yeah? Or they may come back in this human form, in this earthly realm, you know, to continue from where they left off. So maybe at a certain stage of spiritual development, not quite the stage to go back to Godhead. That's the stage called bhava, which is the stage of liberation in this material which we can achieve. But, so if they've still got some attachments, they may come back in the next life and they'll be spontaneously and automatically attracted to the principles of devotion. Yeah? They won't need much convincing. And Krishna within the heart will guide them. Yeah? Like probably most of you have practiced spiritual life in your last life. So that's why you're here now. That's right. So the main point is there is no loss of diminution. But we try to work towards becoming purified of material desire. And we can do it if we apply ourselves very sincerely. See, the idea is that we can't be free of we can't be free of desire, but we transform our desires. So our desires become spiritualized. Yeah? Just like everything you're doing in relationship to running this at the lounge, everything is in relationship to Krishna. So you're desiring to cook the feast, you're desiring to organize it, or you're desiring to come and Harinam, you know? Just that process means you're developing spiritual desires. You're desiring on festivals, you're going to decorate, the temple. So the idea is we flood out material desire with spiritual desire. But it has to be taken on the individual basis. Because sometimes material desires may be quite strong, so therefore we dovetail them. We engage them in such a way that it's not going to distract us from spiritual life. So that might be there as well. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no,
so there's no loss of demolition. This is a short life and we can reach perfection. But even if we don't, we're going to just continue in the next life. And hit the karma mass or state. So there's no loss of demolition. And a little advancement can save us. If we made a little advancement, can save us from taking birth in animal species again. And save us going down into the animal species. Hare Krishna. Yes, please.
Question.
Yeah.
If, of course, you become Krishna,
Yes?
you become a disciple of Krishna, devotee,
Devotee Krishna.
and it's okay, you still have certain tradition from your ancestor and parents, you can still not follow, kind of have in your life, like go and visit the tomb of your ancestor, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we should be respectful.
Is that okay?
Respectful to the past,
Yeah.
respectful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You,
Yes. Yeah.
You just add Krishna.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Add Krishna. So I know some devotees have great respect and still for Jesus because they come from a Christian background. They come from a Catholic background.
Yeah.
They have great respect. Still maintain great respect. Our ultimate shelter is Krishna. That's what we develop. We take a good shelter of Krishna.
Yeah.
You know? But we don't try any further. So just add Krishna.
Yeah.
You know? Until there's some things that we perhaps won't do. If we run a butcher shop,
Yeah. Oh my God.
then we might change that.
No. The thing is, I have one ancestor, and from time to time I go to his tomb somewhere in this North
Okay,
Africa.
you can pray. You can pray for his well-being.
Okay.
Yeah, pray to Krishna.
Yeah.
May he bless this ancestor with
Yeah.
Krishna consciousness. And
Yeah.
also, if we become Krishna conscious and we go back to be with Krishna, then all of our ancestors get liberated as well. Yeah? They all get, Krishna's so pleased with this pure soul who's entered that realm, that anyone who's been in contact with them
Yeah.
in a familial situation,
Can
and they
I?
all get some level of liberation. They get some level of
Can I
liberation.
do? Yeah. Sorry to cut you. Can I do for my parents instead? Can I chant also for my parents? For example, they're dead. Can I do that for them?
Yes.
Okay. Can
But don't forget to chant for you as well.
can I do for me? Yeah. And can I do like one round for my father, one round for my mother? Yeah.
Dedicate. Dear Krishna, I dedicate this realm to my beloved mother, my beloved father. And then chant with them, chant with Krishna in mind, but asking Krishna to give them blessings, to give them, give them.
Thank you.
Sometimes I think of my mother when I chant. She's passed away, so is my father. I wonder where they are now. Krishna, may you give them your mercy. Should do, it's nice to do. You are.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, me too. It's okay.
Everybody peaceful? Everybody happy? Thank you,
so
Murli.
much.
for
Shukadeva ki jai,
Jai.
Bhagavad ki jai.
Hari
Hare
Bol.
Krishna.
Okay then, so we can have the next part of the program as usual. Chairs and everything can go.